Welcome to the Human Momentum Podcast. I'm your host, Erik Schabert, D.O. If you are looking to optimize your health and avoid or failing that, manage and recover from the illnesses, injuries, and diseases that stop so many of us from moving forward through life, you are in the right place. It's my mission to make this podcast an essential, evidence-based resource for people like you who are looking to know what you can do at home to optimize your health and are looking to gather the information you need to get the most out of your relationships with your doctor and other healthcare professionals. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button if this is your first time here, and please remember to like and share this episode if you find it helpful or informative. Also, be aware that I read all of my comments and will attempt to respond to any questions from my viewers as it is appropriate. With that in mind, let's get on with today's episode. Okay, today we are going to try to answer questions that are stripped directly from headlines generated by recently published medical research. Will Ozempic and Mounjaro make you blind while they are treating your diabetes and obesity and protecting you from cancer and dementia? I'm going to dive into some recently published research articles to answer those questions and more on today's episode of the Human Momentum Podcast. All right, all joking and facetiousness aside, Ozempic and Mounjaro are two of the most popular medications in use today, both for obesity and diabetes. They've shown enormous promise in treating these conditions and are probably two of the most effective options we have for treatments of obesity and diabetes. So, research that concerns the efficacy and safety of these drugs is incredibly important to many of us. The first article I want to dive into, and you can see it over my left shoulder now, appeared in the Journal of the American Medical Association in July of 2025. The article concerned the effect on cancer survival for older individuals taking GLP-1 medications for treatment of diabetes. Everybody included in this study had previously been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and was also diagnosed with one of 9 types of cancer: thyroid, pancreatic, bladder, colorectal, lung, kidney, breast, endometrial, or prostate cancer. The participants were being treated with GLP-1 medications, SGLT2 medications, or a type of medication called a DPP-4 for diabetes. Just to give you a little overview of these, the GLP-1s, those are your Ozempic and Mounjaros of the world, being the two most common in that class. SGLT2s, Jardiance, is the most prescribed in that class, and they are a class of medications that acts in the kidney to prevent the body from reabsorbing additional sugar out of the urine. As such, and because it excretes calories basically, this medication has weight loss associated with it, as do the GLP-1s. The DPP-4s act on the same hormone axes as GLP-1s, but they do it much less potently. The advantage of them is that they are oral medications instead of injectables like GLP-1s, but the disadvantage is they just are nowhere near as effective. So in this article, what we saw was that GLP-1s and SGLT2s significantly reduced all-cause mortality, including from cancer, for the individuals in this study, while the DPP-4s did not have that effect. So this is a type of a study called a retrospective study, which does limit how strong a conclusion we can draw from them. So to really understand the significance of this, let's talk a little bit about the types of medical studies out there. Retrospective studies are studies where we go back and look at data that has been collected over prior years on individuals that fit a certain criteria that belong to a certain category. And these are the most easy kinds of studies to do because we really just have to search through medical records to collect the data, and there's no additional setup. The downside to them is that we can't really control a lot of factors that can affect the outcomes data that we get. And because of it, all we can do is draw correlations. We cannot say that something is causing something based on a retrospective study. The other major type of study, the much more powerful one, is a prospective study. In these, we can actually select patients and categorize them based on the outcomes we're going to be looking to assess. And we can run a type of trial called a randomized control trial that can also be double-blinded. And these are our most powerful studies because they're going to do the best job of removing confounding factors and random chance from the equation when we get outcomes. So do look at, when you hear about a study and some kind of result, look at the type of study it is before you absolutely bank that this result is what's going on medically. All right, our second article is another retrospective study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2024. In many ways, this is the precursor of the first study we discussed. And in this study, researchers looked at the effect of GLP-1 medications in type 2 diabetes on the risk of developing 13 obesity-related cancers. And this was a very large study looking at 1.6 million people with type 2 diabetes. And in each of these, the individuals were either treated with a medication combination that included GLP-1s or a medication combination that did not include a GLP-1 and included either insulin or metformin. So over the course of the study, which was a long study from March of 2005 to November of 2018, the incidence of these 13 obesity-related cancers was tracked in each of the two groups. And what they found was there was a statistically significantly lower incidence of 10 of the 13 obesity-related cancers in the group of patients receiving GLP-1 medications compared to the other group. Again, this is a correlational study. So we have an indication that GLP-1s may reduce the incidence of cancer, but we don't know definitively, and we will need prospective studies to sort that out. Our third article, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association's Neurology section in April of 2025, looked at GLP-1 medications and their effect on dementia risk. And in this study, we also saw SGLT2s evaluated, and we had 3 treatment arms. One group of patients who were receiving GLP-1 medications, one group of patients who were receiving SGLT2 medications, and another group that were receiving any other sugar-lowering drugs, such as insulin, metformin, and others. And what we looked for over time was how many patients in each group developed dementia. As it turns out, individuals in the SGLT2 and the GLP-1 arms had a significantly lower risk of developing dementia than those in the third arm. In the case of GLP-1s, it was a 33% lower risk. And this is rather impressive. Again, we cannot draw definitive causation from this study. However, we do have 2 randomized control trials ongoing right now, the EVOKE and EVOKE Plus trials, that are looking at this question. So sometime in the next couple of years, we should have data that more clearly gives us whether or not there is causation in dementia risk with GLP-1s. And finally, our fourth article, our final article, is the one that actually generated the most attention in mainstream and online media. And this was an article, the headline of which was that Mounjaro and Ozempic usage doubled the risk of a specific kind of optic nerve damage or neuropathy. And this is called an anterior ischemic neuropathy. So in this particular study, you had about 160,000 people divided evenly between a group that was receiving Ozempic and Mounjaro for treatment of type 2 diabetes and another that was receiving non-GLP-1 medications for treatment of type 2 diabetes. These groups were both tracked for a number of eye-related issues over the course of the study. And what was found was that the individuals in the GLP-1 group had a higher incidence of this specific ischemic optic nerve neuropathy. Now, it sounds really bad because they said the risk doubled, but we were talking nearly 80,000 people in each of the 2 treatment arms, and we had really a very low baseline incidence of ischemic neuropathy in the optic nerve in both groups. So you had 19 people in the non-GLP-1 group that developed this problem, and 35 individuals in the GLP-1 arm developed the issue. So we had 16 additional cases out of 80,000 people. As far as an absolute risk incidence, this is still very, very small. And even though we can say this rose to the level of statistical significance, meaning that it is highly unlikely that random chance caused the increased incidence, there are a lot of confounding factors that were not accounted for in this retrospective study, meaning that there is a very real potential that the separation in incidence between the non-GLP-1 and the GLP-1 group had nothing to do with the GLP-1 medications. This is another one that we need a prospective study to assess before we can say GLP-1 medications cause anterior ischemic optic neuropathy. As a result, for now, what this means is that individuals who are taking GLP-1 medications for diabetes or for obesity need to be getting annual eye exams. This should be happening anyways in either case, but this is another reason that it's very important to have these eye exams. All right, I know this is a lot of information and these were a lot to digest, but I hope you did find this informative. I hope it taught you a little bit about evaluating medical research as well as what is going on with GLP-1 medications. If you did find this helpful, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel and go ahead and hit that like button. It doesn't cost you anything. And again, it really helps me get this information out to more people. If you have additional questions, because this was so much information, feel free to leave them in the comments section. I do read those comments and I try and respond as I'm able. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you in our next episode.